Have you ever wondered why, no matter how much change we experience in our lives, we still struggle sometimes to navigate it? This week, I talked with Erin Herman, a keynote speaker and change expert. In our conversation, Erin shares how courage, empathy, and a growth mindset aren't soft skills. They're essential tools for leading ourselves and others through change and uncertainty. We talk about the difference between confidence and self assurance and why self assurance is what anchors us when everything around us is shifting. We explore the everyday ways we can influence the environments we're in, regardless of our role. And we talk about one of the hardest decisions of all, recognizing when it's time to walk away. Thank you so much, as always, for listening. Welcome to the Impostor Syndrome Files. My name is Kim Meninger, and as an executive coach and former high-tech leader, my personal mission is to help professionals overcome imposter syndrome so that you can advance your career with confidence. Each week, I interview a new guest who brings a powerful perspective to this conversation, including personal stories, best practices, and new insights. The more we talk about this issue, the more we destigmatize imposter syndrome, recognize that we're not alone, and empower ourselves to access the tools and resources that can help us and those around us. Thank you so much for listening and for sharing with others you think would benefit from this conversation. Welcome, Erin. I am so thrilled to have you here today. I would love to start by inviting you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kim, for having me today. My name's Erin Herman. I'm based in Kansas City. I have two children. I'm a wife. I'm a mother. Professionally, I am a keynote speaker, a writer, a workshop consultant, and also provide CSR consulting for NGOs around corporate partnerships and corporate strategy. I have spent my career working in both the private and the public sector. Most notably, I served as the vice president at the United Nations Children's Fund. And then also I was a vice president at St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital with the ALSAC team there. So pleasure to be here, and thanks so much for having me.
Yes, thanks for being here. You have a really interesting background, and I know that you talk about change, right? I'd love to hear more about kind of what are the problems that you're looking to solve and what your point of view is.
Absolutely. I think there are very few constants in life, but change is one of them. And a long time ago, I realized if I'm going to get really good at being a wife, a mother, a colleague, a friend, I have to figure out how to navigate change. And when you think about, I would consider myself midlife, we have been through so many different evolutions of change, from friends getting married to career changes to new roles to working in new cultures. And if you can figure out how to navigate change successfully, you're ahead of your peers by far. And so I wanted to think about how I could teach audiences through hard lessons that I've learned, through research, through different experiences, but then also ultimately through a methodology that I put together from sitting in rooms with several different Fortune 500 companies. Over and over again, I noticed these three skills that continue to present themselves, and they were courage, empathy, and a growth mindset. And so I built those into a methodology that I take now on the road and teach organizations all over the world how to not only navigate change, but how to make it catalytic and transformational. And it's a passion of mine. So that's what I speak on.
Well, it's so interesting when you talk about the number of changes that we navigate as humans throughout the course of our lives, right? It truly is one of the rare constants. So, why is it so hard? What are we getting wrong?
I think that's a great question. And honestly, thinking about imposter syndrome, I'll just tie it to that. Some people may feel that imposter syndrome is something that's wrong with them, right? People come into these new organizations, they try and change who they are, or they try and adapt to the cultures in which they work in. Now, I always talk about the difference between confidence and self-assurance. And I talk about the fact that self-assurance is something that people cannot take away from you, whereas confidence is based on external validation. that can be built up beautifully, but it can also be stripped away. And so when we talk about imposter syndrome, for example, and people are saying, "Hey, I'm being asked to change or I'm being asked to assimilate into this culture," it's not a self-assurance issue. It's not a confidence issue. It's a system issue because a lot of these work environments are, designed to not promote vulnerability or not reward failure. And I talk about positive failure cultures. So many people strive for perfection and they strive for all these things that are truly unobtainable. And so we can't change who we are. We have to lead with self assurance. We have to be our authentic, vulnerable selves. And we have to, as leaders and executives within these professional settings, we have to look at what are the systems that we're building. Should we pivot those to make them more inclusive, to make them more accepting, and to ultimately promote what I think so many of us are wanting within our workplaces, but we're not able to achieve because of these systems that are ultimately designed to hold us down.
And I think that the emphasis on systems is really important because we're at, I hope, a bit of a transitional point in history in terms of the workplace. And so, depending on what generation you belong to, you've had different experiences, but a lot of people who are working today have grown up in cultures that have been told, you have to check your emotions at the door, right? That there's this sort of this way in which we compartmentalize our humanity, and
Mhm.
that even things like you just said, courage, empathy, and growth mindset might be seen as fluff and
Right.
getting in the way of what really matters in the workplace. So where do you think we are in terms of responding to what you're saying?
Yeah. I think some organizations have really excelled at this, and I think other organizations haven't. And in those environments that are still working on this, you have to ask yourself, well, what am I teaching my people? And ultimately, you're teaching them to survive dysfunction, which, when you talk about the bottom line, when you want that significant return on investment, if you show up disconnected from your people, from your teams, when you take a seat at the table, it shows. It shows in the results, it shows in the team culture that you're building. And so they're simultaneous, they're connected. And the people that say, well, hey, gosh, empathy just makes you weak as a leader. Um, I would argue, I beg to differ. And in fact, Forbes just named empathy as the most important skill within the workplace to exhibit. And I think if you would have asked people 15 or 20 years ago, what's the most important skill? I think it would have been a completely different mix. But our culture, our society, we are changing. I think we're choosing to change, which is phenomenal. I think we still have a long way to go when it comes to, inclusion and kindness and realizing all of these, I would say, soft skills that ultimately weigh on the bottom line. And performance is correlated. I mean, research has shown that performance is strongly correlated to those soft skills.
And so when we think about some of these skills, I appreciate your calling skills because I think sometimes we think that you're empathetic or you're not, right? As opposed to it being a skill. Do you think that there is a way to sell this to organizations with leaders who have historically been skeptical about things like this, and get them to actually invest in building these skills? Or do you think that this is something where we almost have to with start earlier and then embed it in younger leaders who will then take it with them over time?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think everybody is capable of change. That's the beauty of it. And, when I think about myself as a manager and a leader, I didn't always possess this mindset. I've gone in and I've created award-winning platforms. I've worked at the UN. I've secured $300 million partnerships. I still walk into rooms and I think, gosh, I feel like an imposter, or gosh, I can't be too vulnerable because people aren't gonna, trust in my message. And, we talk about people judging people, right? And, research has found that people judge how self-assured you are, how confident you are, within the first 200 milliseconds of you speaking. Okay.
Mm.
So when we're talking about, perception, I try and keep my tone at a very neutral, but as low as I can, verbally speak with a self-assured tone, the lowest tone possible. Because in the first 10 seconds or 200 milliseconds, essentially, it's about the first 10 words, people are judging, sizing you up, saying, is this the leader? Is this who I can trust? Is this who I can put my confidence into? And as you think about the evolution of leadership, when you start out as a young manager who has had zero experience managing somebody to every experience that has humbled you on that journey, your perception shifts. And so I don't think it's too late for anybody. I think that it requires self-awareness, it requires dialogue, it requires us to be able to say, no, our team members need to be seen, they need to be heard, they need to be valued at the table. And I think that is ultimately a journey that everybody is on. So I don't think we have to just focus on the millennials that are becoming the new managers. I don't think we need to focus on just the C-suite and the baby boomers that are about to retire. I think it is truly a collective mix across society that we have to focus on.
I agree. I don't think we should give up on anybody, right? I think it's challenging because sometimes I think about the fact that what we're talking about, vulnerability, empathy, courage, some of these skills are really rooted in our early childhood experiences and how we've grown up more holistically. And we carry those experiences into the workplace. And there are a lot of people who have not had great role models for communication, for conflict management, for empathy, et cetera,
Right,
right? And
right.
so it feels to me bigger than just building workplace skills. It's almost like we need to build these life skills. And you're seeing this everywhere now with the way that people treat each other on social media, the ways in which our civility has declined, right? I wonder if you have thoughts on just the the overall way in which this fits into society, even beyond the workplace.
Yeah, I think, the stakes feel higher. I think there are more ways in which people communicate. 20 years ago, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, that wasn't a thing. And, iPhones, they weren't around. And so the stakes are higher, the visibility is higher. People are craving those dopamine hits, instantaneously, right? And so we need to think about how we communicate with people, how we show up. And I think it actually requires more self-awareness because the stakes are higher than they were 25, 30 years ago. And I always talk about, you know, this concept of silence. And for you to be self-assured or for you to be confident, um, you have to realize that sometimes it's silent confidence because things are going to come across your desk, or you're going to be in a conversation, or you're going to click on social media, and you're going to want to react based on, to your point, maybe how you were raised or the experiences that you've navigated. But the truth be told is sometimes the power lies in the silence, the choice to walk away, to not respond. You see a lot of this on social media. People go back and forth, or they say really harsh things. You can't take that stuff back. And ultimately, you don't know what type of day somebody's having. And so I think it's just super important to remember the stakes are higher. And within that, you have to hold yourself to a higher standard.
I think that's really well said. And I also think it emphasizes the importance of controlling what you can control, which is yourself. We cannot control what other people do and how they react, what kind of a day they're having, as you said. But I'm a big believer in really connecting with who you want to be and which version of yourself are you going to be most proud of, not just in this moment, which,
Right.
sometimes there's that immediate gratification that comes with feeling like, oh, I just took this person down, right? As opposed to a month from now, 10 years from now, when you look back on your life, to say, did I show up in alignment with my values? Was I the person that I really, was striving to be? And so I think just sort of challenging each and every one of us to think about that, hopefully, and I like to believe there are more of us than there are of people
Sure.
who
Yeah.
are committed to that.
Yeah, and I try and teach leaders a grounded sense of value, especially in a face of doubt, which I think oftentimes as a leader and within these organizations, you're meant to have that sense of value. You have to keep your value system with you every step of the journey. People will respect you more for it. People will trust you more for it. And when you are true to your values, you create a sense of purpose for yourself. And so many people walk through life wondering, what is my purpose, or striving for their purpose. And I always say, it's not that complicated. Write down what you value and hold on to it.
Yeah.
That will provide you the comfort, the consideration for others, the ability to change in systems that require you to evolve. That will, provide you the self-assurance when those times of self-doubt creep in. And I think that's super important.
I could not agree with you more. I think that is such a great, I mean, I think about it as almost a roadmap, or, we don't have a blueprint for how to live our lives. We're all kind of making it up as we go along. But the closest thing we have is those values that you're describing. And we have the choice at any given moment to ask ourselves, is what I'm about to do in alignment with my values or not?
Right.
Right. And, realistically, we're not always going to get it right. There are going to be times when we are, exhausted, or we're just too agitated, or whatever the case may be. Right.
Right.
But if we keep that front of mind, we hold ourselves accountable. We're more likely to follow through
Mhm.
on the behaviors that are going to reinforce those values.
Right. And I would also just say, feeling like a fraud or talking about imposter syndrome as you're going through this doesn't doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you, or having those thoughts come through and saying, am I sticking to my values right now, or am I feeling, confused, or feeling like a fraud, whatever it may be. I would say that's not a bad thing. That is self-awareness, which is essential to change, to building your value system, to listening to your intuition. And so I want people to know, just because you feel or your, radar is going off, that is not a bad thing. That is self-awareness, which is essential to your growth and success.
I'm really glad you said that. And I think that even though this topic of imposter syndrome is probably more widely discussed today than ever before, there's still a way in which it feels like a personal struggle. And I think many of us have convinced ourselves that my form of imposter syndrome is the real form of imposter syndrome. Like that we look around, we think everybody else has it all figured out and they're so confident, and there must be something wrong with me. And I think that's where vulnerability comes in. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on vulnerability, because there is a way in which you could be perhaps too vulnerable, right? Like, what are we talking about when we're talking about vulnerability in a workplace setting?
Mhm. I think about so many different workplaces that I've gone into as the new manager on the block or the new change maker. And I tell a story of one room I walked into. It was the first time I had met everyone. I had flown into town. I had met everyone, and everyone was seated in the back three rows of this huge conference room. It was like this visceral response the minute I opened the door and said, "Hi, I'm Erin. Nice to meet you." And you could tell they were craving vulnerability, right? Because nobody takes that type of extreme action unless they feel, hey, my wall's been up forever, but I need that connection. And so I did the walk. I walked across the room. I passed row after row till I was literally right there in front of them. And I pulled up a chair and I said, this isn't a meeting for me to tell you to do more work, or folks are getting, let go, or we're completely, cannibalizing everything that y'all have done to date. This is who I am. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am. And I started with the fact that I'm a mom and I live in Kansas City. And, this is what I enjoy doing outside, like lifting weights, all these things that just made me human instead of the manager.
Mm.
And then I said, I'd like us all to go around the room and say, who are you? What do you like to do? What makes your heart just skip a beat? Like, what lights you up? We saved the work talk for quite a while. And I think within those moments where you're just human, you're just vulnerable, you're just who you are, people connect with you. They want to trust you. You can get so much more out of your people, but it's a genuine, authentic connection that drives that. Whereas if you walk in and you're throwing the results out and you're saying, hey, this is what we need to achieve, you've already lost them in the first 10 seconds.
Mhm.
And again, you need your people to feel seen, to feel safe, to feel supported, to truly succeed.
I love that. I think that that is a missed opportunity in many settings and such an important way to build that connection because we are very, as humans, sensitive to power dynamics, right? When you're in a room, even I often joke that leaders don't realize how scary they are, right? Because we see ourselves as three-dimensional creatures with all the same fears, hopes, doubts that everybody else has. But then when you're in that room with people who work for you or are part of the larger system that you're in, they're looking to you, right? They're reading your body language, they're picking up cues, they're trying to understand. And so you have to create this connection very intentionally that you're describing because otherwise there's this huge perceived chasm between them
Mhm.
and between you. And so turning yourself into not just that leader in the room, but the mom who has the same, you know, dynamics with their kids that they have, or the interests that they also share, is a really humanizing way to break down some of those barriers.
Right, right. Yeah. And, I would say that I always think about, well, who would I want to work for? Who
Mhm.
would I want to have a conversation with? Who am I most apt to listen to? Who am I most apt to connect with? And leadership really isn't that different. Okay. And once we lose the veil of who we think we need to be and we become truly who we are, it's pretty easy.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be overcomplicated.
Yeah. And, I want to acknowledge too that a lot of people right now will often say to me, I don't have time. I would love to do that, but we don't have time. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on making time for this type of activity when everyone feels like they have more on their plates than they have bandwidth for.
Yeah. You know, I think it's twofold because we always have to have time for ourselves. You need that time to decompress. You need that time to say, you know what, this doesn't feel good right now. I need to take a moment back, a step back. We don't need to overextend ourselves for anybody because then we don't show up authentically the way we are. On the flip side, I would say if you're so focused on results or if you are so focused on achievements and you forget to make time for the humanity that is amongst you, ultimately your results will suffer. And so you have to think about what type of team, what type of culture, what type of organization are you looking to create? Uh, and that goes back to those soft skills. If you make time for those soft skills, if you make time for the people on your team, you will actually achieve more than just charging in and thinking you have very little time to connect and trying to just ultimately achieve. It's counterintuitive.
Yeah, I also agree with that. And I'll often joke too, you're already using the time. You either use it proactively to invest in these relationships or you use
Right,
the time to clean up the mess on the other side, right?
right, right. Well, and you think about, this the old CEO of Southwest Airlines, Herb Keller.
Mm.
He took time to get to know every employee in his organization. I mean, it could have been 5 minutes in passing, and a year later, he remembers their name, he remembers the detail about their family. And if you looked at the statistics at the time that he was the leader, Southwest Airlines had the lowest turnover rate in the industry, which this is an industry plagued with turnover. They had less than 4%. They had the most employees in the airline industry. They also had built a beautiful brand reputation of kindness and empathy and compassion, which, I would say we can all agree it's not the nicest airline to fly, but people, associate Southwest with kind staff, good customer service. Those are all things that are passed down by the CEO. And he took a very different and proactive approach than others. And he took time to get to know people, and that had a cascading effect on his people.
So an example like that is great because he had so much influence as the top of that organization. But do you think that this is a worthwhile endeavor for people who maybe don't feel like they have the ability to influence up, but
Mm.
they're, managing a team of their own?
I love that question, actually, because yes, I do. We all have a role to play. We all have a role to play. I will just reemphasize that. Change is not a top-down approach. It's not a memo. It's not a 5-year strategy plan. Change starts with us. We are the epitome of change, every single person in the organization. I talk about different exercises people can apply when they're looking at what's happening in their organizations. And is it important for leadership to show, their role and be vulnerable? Absolutely. With my audiences, I play this game called Why Me? And I ask everybody in the audience to go around and share what role they have to play in change or in creating this environment that they want to create, but also why is it important to them personally? And I asked the CEO to do this all the way down to, you know, the people shutting off the lights at night. And I think it's important to show that we all are committed to this culture. We all have a role to play, no matter our title, no matter, our gender, no matter any external or internal factor, we all have a role to play. And when we lead with just a little level of vulnerability, we can build trust, we build momentum, and we let those walls down and we can work more cohesively together.
I love that. I'm so inspired by the idea of having that kind of agency, right? I think we often feel like we're at the mercy of others and we have more power and influence than we think we do. Uh, would you, do you have and this is going to sound like a ridiculous question, but sort of a formula for thinking about whether you have done what is possible and it's still not working and it's time to go? Uh,
As far as like if you should leave your organization after a certain period of time?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I'm always trying to, sort through how much of this is within our control, and that
Yeah.
if we sort of take some of these steps, we might actually be the change we want to see, so to speak, versus, I've exhausted my options and I just really can't get what I need out of this system.
Yeah. I feel like when you're afraid to challenge the status quo in your organization, like when you ask yourself, well, how do I really play into change? This is above my pay grade, or this isn't something I can play an active role in. It's time to go.
Mm.
It's time to go. It's that simple because you need to be able to have that type of safety, that type of ability to be seen and to be heard. And if you don't, and you're afraid that if you play big, you're going to be let go or you're going to be, creating these adverse reactions, then it's time to go. And I would also just say, if it's Saturday morning and most kids are getting up, most parents are getting up, running their kids to soccer practice, and you already have this dread in your stomach about going to work on Monday, it's time to go.
Mm.
Those are, the telltale signs. And then I would say, we're talking about value system and connecting to yourself. If you are working 40, 60 hours a week and you've got a full call schedule, you've got all these meetings, you're giving it 110%, but inside you feel incredibly disconnected to yourself, it's time to go.
Mm.
Because again, you have to be connected to who you are, your values, your purpose, your intrinsic internal system and alarm bells that are saying this feels good or this doesn't feel good. You've got to listen to that. That's like an inner guide that you can never silence that voice. And lastly, I would just say, and this is more, I think, geared towards women, but if if you're working in a system that wasn't necessarily designed for you, and you feel that there's opportunity where you can grow and excel, amazing. But if you get the sense that playing big or, stating your voice loud and proud or quiet and assertive is unwelcomed, you've got to ask yourself that question, is this the right place for me?
Mhm.
And it's a tough, tough question to have. But I would also say don't ever let your comfort zone become your cage.
Oof, that's a really great way to frame it. And a really great message for everybody listening. And it doesn't mean you have to run to the nearest exit. You can develop your exit strategy, take your time, do what you need to do, but recognize that this is not the place where you're going to do your best work and be your best self.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm. Erin, you have brought so many amazing insights to this conversation. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about your work, stay connected with you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Jump on my website, www.theerinherman.com. I have different keynotes that I speak on, different cities that I'm going on tour to, a little bit more about my consulting and workshop facilitation business. So please connect. Also, I'm on LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram. So please connect. I love to just hear also from listeners and from different audience members, what are you facing right now in the workplace? What is affecting you? Is it change? Is it imposter syndrome? Is it authenticity, vulnerability? Reach out. I respond to every single message, and I think collectively together we are stronger. So share your stories, share your thoughts, and know that I will respond.
Wonderful, Erin. Thank you so much. Those links will be in the show notes. And just thanks again for your work and for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kim. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to the Impostor Syndrome Files. If you would like to continue this conversation in a safe and trusted space, I would love for you to join my virtual discussion group every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. For the past several years, the group has been limited to women, but it is now open, regardless of gender, to anyone who is interested in exploring and troubleshooting common workplace challenges, building better awareness of ourselves and others, and becoming more inclusive allies at work. Check out the show notes for more info on how to find us, and please join us next week for another episode of the Impostor Syndrome Files.